So we were talking about the C series or the Q series, excuse me, jets, right? And
Well,
the
they're prop planes, but yeah.
what?
The Q400s are prop planes.
No, they were jets. They were basically a baby 737.
Oh, then we were talking about different planes.
Yeah, it's oh yeah, the Q400. Sorry, you know what? That's a mistake in the last episode. So anyone who goes and you said Q400 and I screwed up. The Q400 is a Bombardier plane, but there's
CS100s
was it the CS100? What were they? Boeing. Oh, sorry, not
or
Boeing.
the CRJs.
No. C100. Yeah. So the last episode, we meant to say the Bombardier C series, CS100, CS300. Those were the planes, which eventually became the Airbus A220s, which are flying. They're basically like tiny planes. They're tiny jets. They're not not the sort of planes that you would fly with. Taylor Swift would fly, although maybe she got big enough, she'd buy one, but they would be used kind of in between having, a prop plane for, going short distances and a 737. It was sort of to be in between. It was an area that Bombardier was trying to capitalize on that really only had competition from I want to say, this is showing my ignorance of the entire aerospace sector, but Embraer and is it CMAC? I think is the name of, or Comac. Sorry, Comac is the Chinese plane manufacturer. I think Comac has a very similar plane. But I will say that Embraer planes are forever in a bad place for me. Not for the plane itself, but for one of the most traumatic flights I've ever been on.
Oh, what's this?
Okay, so I was flying from Toronto to Chicago. This was about 11, 12 years ago.
Well, there's your mistake.
Yeah, well, this was when I was a consultant, and I was sitting in one of those Bombardier, sorry, one of those Embraer planes. They believe it was like a 2-in-1 configuration. So it's a very strange plane to be on because 2-in-1 is such a strange layout. But whatever. It's a flight between Toronto and Chicago. Too big for a -8 or whatever it is, and too small for a 737. So they ran these planes.
Yeah,
And
the
I
the
get
margin for what's efficient for a Dash 8 or Q400 is very particular.
Yeah, it's a very strange niche. And so on this flight, I was seated with this guy who was an American, and he kept taking pulls of his vape on the plane.
Oh dear.
Yeah, this is prior to the airlines, getting wise to vaping. So vaping is this plague that was affecting us now, but it was a problem then too. And he had one of the stewardesses eventually told him to knock it off, and he's like, "Oh no, it's electronic and all this sort of thing. There's no smoke." And and I'm just like, this sucks. But that wasn't really the problem. The problem was that he kept going on about conspiracy theories to me the whole time. And like he was a 9/11 truther and was
Oh good.
going on about 9/11 to me while we're on a plane, which is, fantastic. And I'm just sitting in the plane and I'm just like, I can't wait to get to Chicago. And this is my second trip ever to Chicago, and in the middle, but this time in the middle of winter as opposed to the middle of summer. And it was an okay trip, but I the trip was marred by this idiot, this vaping idiot who, before the era of savory vapes, kept spending the entire hour and a half flight telling me about how Bush did 9/11. I'm pretty certain that he probably was there during January 6th. I wouldn't be shocked if he were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. American conspiracy weirdos are a strange bunch.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that actually Richard Nixon did 9/11, as in the 1973 assassination of Salvador Allende.
I'm pretty certain that's not the 9/11 my vaping friend made while I was on that plane.
It's the only 9/11 I recognize as a terror attack.
All right, let's start this. Do you want to start the show?
Yeah, sure.
Fine,
Let's
let's start
let's
the show.
do chocolate. Hello and welcome to the Shawinigan Moments podcast. I am one of your hosts, Tamarack. My pronouns are they, them, or it. And joining me today is...
Heather, and I use she or they, and I am also one of the hosts. We're not talking about planes today, right?
We are not talking about planes. I can promise you there is no amount of planeage happening today.
I promise you from this point on that there will be no content about airplanes.
You can't promise that.
Oh, is there? Well, okay. So normally, don't we do the news normally, don't we?
We do, but we have a special segment that you bullied me into.
Yeah, it's time for a flashback. Many, many moons ago, back in the fledgling days of this podcast, we did an episode about a lady famously known for her chocolate. She was the creator of this chocolate, and nobody, usurped her name or whatever. But yeah, if you tune to our first episode, we made a remark about Laura Secord chocolates.
Yes.
And we meant to talk a little bit more in depth about the chocolates. But
Well,
Tamarack,
not in
fill us
depth.
in on why we didn't.
Well, you texted me foolishly asking if I should buy some chocolates. Uh, which I said, "Oh, that's a good idea," and then promptly decided to not do any of that, and and instead kind of just didn't. And
I feel like your memory of this is rather shoddy because the story I seem to recall is I messaged you saying, "Hey, Laura Secord chocolates are not easy to come by out in the West Coast. Would you mind if I went and bought a bunch of chocolate for us from their website and have it shipped to us so it arrives in time so we can talk about it during the episode?"
yes, and I was like, I don't know, I've seen it around, forgetting that my local grocery store has changed hands and is now just a Jim Pattison like Save On.
As opposed to a Jim Pattison Nesters.
It had more stuff. It used to.
Well, nonetheless, Laura Secord chocolates are not easy to come by on the West Coast. Generally
No, they're very
speaking,
much an East Coast thing.
yeah, if you're outside of Ontario or Quebec, you're not going to find this standalone stores. Like this is Purdy's Chocolate Land, and
Yes.
we don't generally get Laura Secord chocolates outside of Easter. Now, one big difference between Tamarack and I in terms of diets is that they're vegan.
Yes, I am allergic to lactose.
And while I'm vegetarian, I'm not above consuming milk because it won't kill me. That meant that due to recording being around Easter, I managed to get some Laura Secord chocolate that contained milk. And so I was going to talk about the Easter chocolates that the company puts out and actually are made available on the West Coast. So I did get my hands on a chocolate peanut butter egg. It was really good. I don't really have too many remarks about it now because it's been several months since I consumed it. But I did make some tasting notes in preparation for the episode, and I put down would eat again, was a little too big. That's about it.
Yeah, that's what I remember from being a kid is two things about Laura Secord chocolates. One, the chocolate bunnies are giant and very just
I did
solid
buy one of
chocolate.
those and consumed it, and it was also too much.
Yeah, so the other thing that I remember from it is that the chocolate made my mouth feel weird and also made me feel sick after eating some of it. Something I wouldn't find out the reasoning for until my late 20s.
So
I guess mid 20s.
So one of the things that worked out really funnily was that on I think it was like Easter Sunday, I found myself shopping at a Marshalls. And Marshalls, for those who are not familiar or not listening outside of North America, is TK Maxx if you're in the UK or Ireland, for example. Out of the blue, while I was looking at dresses, I stumbled across a whole bunch of chocolate from Laura Secord. And I bought it immediately because it was vegan. And they also had some chocolates that were not vegan. So I grabbed some Maple Crunch, which it comes in a 100-gram bar, and a Toffee Crunch 100-gram bar. I finished the Toffee Crunch bar, and I really liked it. I would eat it again if I were offered the opportunity to eat it. I have the Maple Crunch in my hand, and I probably only finished 50% of it. The maple is going to be a bit of an interesting thing for this episode,
Yes.
admittedly. It's a little bit on theme, which is why we're talking about chocolate. But neither one of us have consumed the dark chocolate. So Tamarack is at their home, and I'm at mine, and I have prepared some chocolate for myself to consume, plus a glass of dairy milk. And I believe you
I
have some oat milk.
Yes, I have some 70% dark chocolate. I have a little tiny espresso, and I have some oat milk. Some oat milk. Some
Oat milk?
oat milk. Oat milk.
Oit milk. Oit milk, governor.
I
Anyway.
I have some oat milk.
Say
Yeah,
that.
I have some oat milk. I have
Say
some
that
oat
in
milk.
German again. I want to hear this again.
I have some oat milk.
What would be ointment milk? It's ointment milk.
Ointment milk.
I have no idea what that would be. How do we want to do this? Do we just want to give everybody an ASMR and then or do we just want to like eat it and then I edit it out in post?
I have no idea how the fuck you're gonna edit this entire intro segment. Good luck.
Well,
hey, future Heather.
yes.
Thanks.
Oh
Thanks.
yeah, I'm looking forward to
Thank
this.
you. Thank you, future Heather. Hey, future Heather, you're the best. I love you platonically, but I love you. You do good work.
Time right to eat some damn chocolate.
Okay. All right. First bite.
Hey, this is good. Wonder if I can take a selfie of this and then you can just put this in the. It'll be the most interesting photo anyone ever sees on YouTube of me.
Okay, because the price tag was on it, I know how much it cost. For what it is, it's pretty good dark chocolate.
Mhm.
I probably would stick to Purdy's because their vegan offerings are just way better. And also, I'm a partisan hack.
I'm gonna drink my milk.
It's really good with the oat milk, though.
I don't have any oat milk. I just have dairy milk. I haven't gone grocery shopping this week.
So, like, a thing with a lot of dark chocolates is that they end up being, in addition to being very bitter, which kind of like sucks the moisture out of your mouth and off your palate, they also tend to be very like very dry just in general.
I feel like 70% is the best way to have dark chocolate.
Yeah, it's the top end of edible unless you're like a psychopath like me and like 90% chocolate is some like a taste you enjoy. That shit is fucking bitter, but I'm also fucking bitter, so whatever.
I've had 90%. I think it was 90%, and I want to say this was when it was Lindt, because this was back when Sears occupied the building that Nordstrom would occupy and that nobody seems to occupy now. And they had an entire Lindt stand, and my girlfriend at the time and I were trying out like the various chocolates that they had available because you're in your early to mid 20s and you're just kind of being dumb about things. And I decided to try a sample of like I think it was like 90%. I'm pretty certain it was that high up. The best way I could describe when you start eating chocolate at that point is that it may as well be chalk.
Yeah, it just sucks the moisture out of your palate. It's incredible.
Mm-hmm. So the Laura Secret chocolate, if I was living in Toronto, this would be fine. I'm not. I would never ever again go out of my way to consume chocolate from this company. It just luck had it that I would find this stuff sitting in a store in a suburb of Vancouver.
You still spent $7 on it, which I think was too much.
It's 300 grams of chocolate. That's actually fairly reasonable.
Fair.
Like I will say, out of all the purchases, two things. One, out of all the purchases I made, the toffee crunch was actually my favorite, and that was only $3.50. But economically, the 100-gram bars were more expensive than the 300-gram bars.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we have in BC in particular is because we have Purdy's and like Rocky Mountain Chocolate and stuff like that. Like we have a lot of companies that like cheap chocolate brands usually you don't. Not that Rocky Mountain is cheap, but like cheap chocolate brands usually don't really know what to do with a dark chocolate.
And I'm going to correct you on something. Rocky Mountain Chocolate's American.
Oh, well, fuck them.
I actually have never consumed their chocolate before. They have a couple locations, one that's near my old place. But Purdy's has their factory not far from where I live. And, I've been eating Purdy's most of my life. Like, it was always a thing at Christmas time to get Purdy's delivered, as not delivered to me, but like my father would get it delivered to his work. And my dad's not a person who eats sweets. Like, he'll eat, I think, ice cream and fruit, and that's about it. So you'd always end up coming home with chocolates from various suppliers from his company, and like I grew up on Purdy's, and nowadays like I don't eat as much chocolate or sweets now, but I will say this: I'm not that big on chocolate. The reason why I'm not big on chocolate is I kind of it's a bit of a weird split, but like you always compare vanilla and chocolate together. They are both beans, so I guess it's kind of fair. and I kind of like vanilla more.
You can do like vanilla has a lot more utility. Chocolate is a very like specific statement sort of thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Like
that said, use it all the fucking time in baking. And that's like pretty much the majority of my chocolate consumption is putting it in baked goods.
yeah, and I find that chocolate works really well if you're doing baking, but as a standalone thing, I've less and less enjoyed it. Now, that said, I was when I made the remark about the Laura Secord peanut butter chocolate egg thing. I love peanut butter and chocolate. If you want to talk about favorite flavor combinations, vanilla just gets overpowered by everything. But if you want to do something that works hand in hand almost all the time, it's chocolate and peanut butter. But my problem with the Laura Secord chocolate peanut butter egg was that their ratio was not right, like which is why I still love Reese's peanut butter cups, and that's garbage chocolate.
Yeah, but it doesn't need to be good chocolate. It just needs to like have a little bit of that bitterness to go with the peanut butter.
So that's the problem is that I'm a little bit spoilt on this because being that I can go to the United States pretty easily, I can go to Trader Joe's, the closest one being 45 minutes from the border, and I can go and pick up a box, like a small little tin box, like a plastic container full of dark chocolate peanut butter cups. And they're like these tiny little ones that you could eat in a handful and you'll regret your life. Don't worry about it. Like you just will regret everything in your life because you've ate too many of these things. But they're so fucking good.
I think it's the Nora brand, but there's a vegan peanut butter cup that is fucking amazing.
I thought those were made with sunflower because I know exactly what you're talking about too.
Oh, they might be. No, well, they're not made with sunflower, but they might have sunflower oil in them if that's an allergy problem.
Maybe. I don't have any allergies outside of specific fruits, so, if any,
Okay.
CSIS assassins wanna go after me, just you can get me with, most pitted fruit, just as an FYI, or,
Tiny bit
apples.
of apple juice.
Yeah, no, apples are something I'm allergic to. There's your fun fact for everybody. If you're trying to kill me, just get me to drink, like, a 4 liters of apple juice. You probably will, like, cause my guts to, like, rip themselves apart.
Oh yeah, like less than like 50 mil of like lactose milk, and I'm fucking my insides are my outside.
Yeah, and I guess this we can end this on. I can talk a bit about the maple crunch. I'm gonna eat one. No, I don't feel like it. I don't want to eat more chocolate. We should just move on. I've had too much sugar. Anyone, people will be going like, "Oh, she's just she's being a baby," but like, I don't want any more sugar. I've had enough sugar today.
So let's talk about maple crunch, particularly. Let's roll the clip.
Sgsmåthquet? Sgsmåthquet.
Hmm. And Your Majesty may be pleased to know that this year, thanks to the help of our Indian friends, we have produced some 30,000 pounds of this sweet gift.
And what is this sweet gift? It's maple syrup.
I have such a love hate relationship with maple syrup.
Oh, I love maple syrup because I grew up on the like fucking fake like high fructose corn syrup stuff. It used to be called Aunt Jemima. It's something else now.
It's called Peril River because sort of like how they have like they kept using the faces of black persons on their packaging for whatever stupid reason. Yeah, that's what happened. And then eventually, I'm like, this is kind of fucking dumb, and it's like, yeah, it is.
Nothing says person who makes you breakfast every morning quite like racialized person. Uh, Anyway, so let's say you're European colonists and you don't have any of your fancy pantsy bees around. What do you do?
Use onions. I'm not joking, actually. Onions.
Yeah, onions and beets. But let's say you decide to actually, talk to the people who already live here. You might discover that they've had this fantastic thing called maple syrup.
So basically, tree pea.
Oh, oh, we'll get to what it is. Uh, so, what is maple syrup? Well, maple syrup was originally invented in pre-colonial times by maple trees for transporting nutrients and hormones and other necessities of plant life. It's sap.
Very delicious sap. Very sweet.
Sometimes we'll get to why. If you ever like got sap on your hands and licked it because you're struggling with gender as a 10-year-old in the wilderness, you'll find that it is not actually that sweet. It kind of tastes like ass. That's partially because there's two kinds. There's the Xylem, which is on the inside of the tree, so not the stuff that you usually get accidentally on your hands and your mom yells at you while she's scrubbing it off your fingies before you're about to get photos with grandma. And then there's the phloem. The Xylem is the stuff that basically takes nutrients from the roots to the leaves. And then the phloem is the stuff that transports nutrients, kind of all like circulates like post photosynthesis stuff around the tree.
So this is tree blood.
This is tree blood. Yes. The xylem is basically the like post-respiratory blood. The phloem is the pre-respiratory blood or whatever in this metaphor. Yes, it's tree blood. The mechanism of how it transports around the plants, as if you want to do a little like Wikipedia like knowledge hole that is short, under an hour, I promise. Check out the Psyllium wiki page for the debate about how exactly this shit moves around trees, because it's strange. But yeah, xylem sap is used in a number of plants, as used by food for humans around the world for ages. Plenty of non-human animals eat the stuff. There's a whole bunch of like insects that bore into trees to feed off sap flows, see pine beetles and stuff like that. So like this isn't anything new. This is fairly common. It's used for alcohol sometimes, particularly in Eastern Europe, off birch sap. Which is like the insect thing is a little bit creepy though if you keep up with the blood metaphor. But anyway,
well, doesn't that kind of also imply that certain birds are involved too? Because I'm thinking of like what's a bird that would actually do something like this? Like I know hummingbirds, for example, live off of something similar.
Yes.
And then there's woodpeckers that come to mind. Although I don't remember what woodpeckers do specifically, if they have any role in consuming of.
They're picking the bugs that are like hanging out and eating the phloem.
Okay, that makes more sense, because I was trying to think about this here. It's like, no, I don't think the woodpeckers consume anything to do with the tree itself, but they would go. Them going after the bugs makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, the bugs basically live between the bark and the wood, where the phloem kind of where those capillaries exist, and then if you've ever picked up a piece of wood that has all those like little squigglies on the outside, that's like worms and things like that eat at the phloem.
Right,
And most of the time the tree's fine with this. It has built-in immune responses to make sure that it doesn't get out of hand for the most part. So yeah, a harvesting sap thing people have been doing for a long time. But it turns out that you can't just drill a hole into a maple tree and expect maple goo to flow out. Well, you can, but what flows out is not going to be incredibly palatable. There's actually a very specific set of environmental conditions that allow for concentration of sugar in the roots during part of the day, and the sap to still flow enough to be harvestable during another part of the day. And for Eastern Canada, for maple trees, that happens around late winter, early spring, at time of writing. Put a pin in that.
I don't like where this is going. I feel like it's going to become depressing fast.
You know, it's a Tamarack episode when.
Yes.
All right, this was something that the Indigenous population in Canada figured out basically for as long as we have records for, that basically you tap the trees, you wait until the end of winter, and then you can kind of like start collecting them. Process from there, it's still not done. What you're going to get is you're going to get a very like thin, watery, still sugary, but thin, watery goop. And that's not really convenient. So, and there's also going to be other products in it, bacteria and things. So you're going to want to evaporate or boil off a lot of that moisture. And that's when you finally get syrup.
Do you have to run this through, like, say, cheesecloth or whatever? Because you're not going to be getting just liquid out of it. You are going to get, like, other things that may not necessarily be good that you can deal with from a filtration standpoint.
Apart from microbes, not really. Like, I believe it is filtered these days, but in ye olde times, no, not really, because you have to keep in mind this is tree blood, and the tree's already doing a little bit of like cleaning. Like this is traveling through either by some sort of magical property of water, or by osmosis, or by capillary action. Again, 1 hour-ish Wikipedia rabbit hole.
I was going to make a quip about whether or not they have a liver inside of a tree, but me and biology are kind of actually really shitty, and I do know that there are no such things as tree livers, at least not in a mammalian sort of way.
Well, I mean, the whole structure of the tree from root into stem is kind of a type of like filtration system for this. But yeah, we are not a plant biology podcast. I just thought it was really funny to say that maple syrup was invented by maple trees. Anyhow, like all good things, early colonizers were taught by First Nations folks how to harvest and process maple syrup, and it quickly became a food staple, given that it has very high caloric content, particularly when combined with like fats and stuff to form kind of like blocks of it. And also because, quite crucially, it's available late winter and early spring, which is when winter food stores are going to be their absolute thinnest. So
Is this where the whole thing about pouring syrup on ice comes from?
yeah, that was the thing that First Nations folks were doing, which is fucking delicious.
I like to
It's
try it.
straight.
I've never been out in was it there's a festival in Quebec that's, I want to say, in February or something, that would serve this sort of thing. And I do know that based on things that people told me about visiting Quebec City, that you can actually get this treat. It'll just be, slush with maple syrup poured on top.
Yeah, I haven't ever had it in Quebec, but as a thing in our, I think, middle school French class of all things, the last year I took French, so that would have been like grade 7. We just made some with snow.
One thing I should point out, and this is kind of a side note, you may be hearing like us talk about Canada in a certain way. Canada's a very large country.
It's a very large country.
It's a very large country. And to put it into context, I did not visit Toronto until 15 years ago, and I'm approaching 40 years old. And it's just not a common thing to be going from Vancouver to Toronto, Vancouver to Quebec City, Vancouver to Montreal on the regular. Like, I'm these days, it's not unusual to find me in those cities. It's something, I know people there, I'm friends with people there. But like growing up, like these places that I would end up going to were like Seattle. It's like the idea of like finding Quebec City having, maple syrup on slush as a very strange concept is only because, if you want to go and visit Quebec City, you're looking at a 5+ hour flight, or a 3 to 4 day of constant driving just to get there.
Or 12 days on Via Rail.
No, it's not that long. It's probably about at the same time if you were to like reasonably drive. It's just that you get somebody to drive the train nonstop, almost, with the exception of whatever CN or CPKC are doing on their fucking tracks. Anyway,
Subject to future episode, but also, yeah, it's a long ass journey. Anyway, post kind of colonial contact, the process of making maple syrup hasn't really changed. It's been mildly streamlined, and obviously it's been industrialized. Would you like me to pull my pin out on that at time of writing, or do you want me to continue on?
Oh, you might as well tell me all about this.
All right, so to pull that pin out about as at time of writing, as the climate changes, the ideal zone for maple tapping shifts further and further north. This is a bit of a problem because maple trees take a while to be ready for harvesting, upwards of 40 years into their lifespan. So this is a bit of a problem, as 75% of the world's maple syrup comes from a small regional area in southern Quebec, Sćwk, Vermont, and that's a lot of production to relocate. It could be done speculatively, like speculating on where there will be a tolerable zone for production in 40 years and change from the initial site selection. But that requires you to predict where climate change is going to be in 4 decades, and also you need to still be around making maple syrup at that time. Now, there is someone who could potentially do this, put a pin in that, but at current pace, no major sites of maple syrup production will be within the ideal zone for making it by 2100. The entire industry at its current state will be in like completely unsustainable at current pace.
That's reminding me of a problem, sort of as a tangent to this with trees, is so we eat a lot of nuts, right? So we have, you know, cashews and walnuts and all that, and you can just go into a store and you can buy those. But one of the things that people don't realize is that acorns are actually edible. And the only reason why acorns have never really made it as something you would find on a store shelf on the regular is that the sort of acorns that you'd want to eat, and I imagine there's other things, because, like, for example, almonds, if you don't grow them properly, as in if you don't use the right type of almond, you're going to kill people. But the thing about acorns is that their trees take forever to mature to the point where you can start harvesting them for their nuts.
Yes.
And when it comes down to, and I almost certain that it probably takes more than 40 years for an acorn tree to grow. So if we're struggling with just 40 years for a maple tree, that's probably the reason why we'll never see acorns as an option for a topping on your ice cream.
Yeah, or that weird acorn-based coffee alternative
There's an
that
acorn-based
strange.
coffee alternative.
Yeah, you need to have a particular kind of weird guy at your office in order to have seen this, but yes, I have seen it. Anyway,
This
just to
stuff is
cap off the
wild. I'm
doom.
just looking at this up, sorry, real quick here. This is
Sure.
wild. I kind of want to try it because, like, I do have a caffeine sensitivity issue. But anyway,
So just to cap off the doom, I want to reiterate: at current pace of climate change, we are
cool,
accelerating.
cool beans. Love it. I love this.
Yeah. All right. So, maple syrup. It comes from plants. Plants which also need that sap to live. And being living creatures and having no regard for the wants or desires of humankind, the harvest year to year varies, as it does with all plants. Except, since a new tree isn't ready for harvest well into its maturity, and you can't exactly over harvest the trees you have without killing them, setting you back 40 years, you can't exactly harvest more to make up for a shortfall or a bad year. And since it's all harvested basically within the same geographic area, again, suck it, Vermont. If you have a bad year for most of the crop, you have a bad year for most of the crop. Like it affects everybody pretty much equally because it's again a small regional area in southern Quebec.
One of the things that a lot of people need to remember is that you may have noticed that produce prices have gone up. They're going to continue to do so until, well, there's no produce to sell. So if you think that every year we're going to keep getting those bell peppers, or we're going to go, you know, like if you keep thinking that stuff is going to be available for you on the shelf forever, think again. Don't think that this stuff is not going to affect you eventually.
However, here's the difference between maple syrup and the bell peppers. Maple syrup doesn't spoil. That's one of the reasons the First Nations, particularly the Algonquin people, love this stuff.
So it's akin to honey.
Yeah, it's a late winter food that you can stockpile and it doesn't go bad. So, in 2002, if you are the Quebec maple syrup producers, or French name I'm not going to attempt to pronounce, you buy a bunch of warehouses in rural areas all around the province of Quebec, and you overproduce on good years and store the excess for years with poor harvests.
That's pretty normal behavior.
Yeah, it's just another one of the Canadian agricultural cartels.
Cool.
We have a lot of them, and they all kind of work the same way. Everybody sells a fixed amount to them, and they basically act as a monopoly middleman. Usually they're cooperatives, so anyway, we'll get into it. This was a normal agro co-op that already existed, the Quebec maple syrup producers. Like, they formed in the 1960s, again around the time as most of the agri cartels did in Canada, and then they became a little bit strange when they decided to create this strategic stockpile. Did it work? Well, hey Heather,
Mhm.
let's say you're a multinational food manufacturer in the year of 2008 and wanted to make maple brown sugar oatmeal, the best kind. How much money will you need to spend on maple syrup to make what I cannot stress enough is the best kind of oatmeal?
Well, considering that 2008 was a great year economically.
Yes, it was definitely not a year where a lot of people are going to need inexpensive staple foods.
Shoot at me. Tell me.
Well, if you're Quaker Oats and said $2.40 per pound, the same as last year, you'd be incorrect, because that would have been 2 bad harvests ago. Now it's the future year of 2008.
Good
where
year.
again,
It's a really good year.
nothing bad is going on. And we're
Obama got
3
elected and racism was solved.
Yes, racism has just ended, but we are 3 bad harvests deep. So that'll be $4 a pound, please.
So did Quaker, which I believe was a Pepsi company at the time, were they happy about it?
No, they were not.
Oh, okay.
But hey, that was 3 bad years in a row. Cut the strategic reserve some slack. Surely that was an anomaly, and there wouldn't be any other incidents that would deplete the stockpile unexpectedly.
Oh,
Right?
this is foreshadowing.
Foreshadowing is a literary device. Okay, so I mentioned they bought a bunch of warehouse spaces, yeah?
Sure.
Random rural towns.
There's plenty of those to go around in Quebec.
Yeah, dotted all over the province.
Yeah, plenty of those, especially along the St. Lawrence.
Yeah. So between 2011 and 2012, 9,571 barrels of maple syrup worth 18.7 million loonies, or 25.5 million loonies today, were replaced with barrels of water in one of the cartel warehouses, one about 2 hours out from Montreal.
I'm going to say water, famously sweet. Actually, if your water is
Yes.
sweet, there's probably a problem.
Famously sweet and famously the same weight and density as maple syrup.
Wait, could you swim in maple syrup?
No, they are not the same density or weight.
Oh.
Yeah, so this was discovered in July of 2012, because during the next inventory of the warehouse where these were found missing, the inspector noted abnormally light barrels because he was climbing on them.
Oh, shit. Why was he climbing on them?
Apparently, that's part of the inspection, is climbing up on the barrels, which is A, king shit, B, please do not climb on stacks of barrels.
That's a work safe problem.
One of the things I read is that he reported that the barrels were buckling and shifting under him. These were unsecured stacks of barrels in a warehouse, and he was alone.
You know, like one of my biggest fears is like having an injury at home and then being like hurting myself like badly enough that like nobody finds me for days on end, and then people find me eventually. My cat's like eating half my face or something.
Yeah, same. I think we all have that fear. This was an inside job. And
Okay.
yeah.
So there's people inside the maple syrup cartel that are like, let's fuck around. Like, who did they sell it to?
Yeah, your lwətaʔ here. There's a collection of people with incredibly French name.
You got Richard Vallier, Etienne Saint-Pierre,
Who's the
Vicaron,
ringleader.
Sebastian Jutras? That's not a French name, that's Jutras.
Yeah, Etienne Saint-Pierre was the syrup reseller, who's the fence.
My apologies to anybody in Quebec who hears me speak any level of French and gets it all wrong. I'm making an effort because I try and keep my French up to date. But anyway, sorry.
I do not. Ich spreche Deutsch.
Okay, whatever.
Die meisten Sprache auf der Welt. Anyway,
for all the German speakers out there, please write into mailbag@shawiniganmoments.ca to comment on their German pronunciation.
Not my German pronunciation, the fact that was nonsense. Anyway, you had Avec Sharon, whose spouse owned the warehouse where the syrup was stolen from. And because you need one, you have Sebastien Jutras, who was the getaway driver. He was a truck driver who transported all the ill-gotten maple syrup.
Because this was what year was this? 2012?
Yeah, this was 2012.
You know, maybe he was the Uber driver. Like, you know, actually, wait, did Uber exist in Quebec in 2012? Who knows?
I don't believe so, no.
Yeah, well, okay.
I don't think it was even in Canada in 2012. Anyway, yeah, so there was also like a dozen more people that I couldn't fit into neat heist movie roles. The fun part about this is that this was at the time, and I believe it still is, because I haven't found any evidence to the contrary, the largest heist in Canadian history.
You know what? I was going to correct you and say that the heist at Pearson last year of all that gold was it, but the gold was only worth $20 million.
25.5, baby. Yeah, I looked at that one too. Sponsorship scandal wasn't a heist.
Oh, I don't care.
It wasn't even a caper.
The sponsorship scandal was like well within the rearview mirror of the liberals at that point.
Yeah. So like this is the biggest heist and or caper in Canadian history.
So this was all Stephen Harper's fault.
Yes, this was all Stephen Harper's fault. Again, like we
Former
should
Prime Minister.
nationalize, like just like the Americans have their like nationalized strategic oil reserve, we need to nationalize our strategic maple syrup reserve.
Could you imagine? Like, I guess you could. You could turn maple syrup into a biofuel.
You could. It is like some sort of it is the hydrocarbons, sugars.
Yeah, it would be the worst thing to put into your car's engine. Like, it would gum it all up to all hell pretty quickly, and it would.
Well, you'd refine it like you do with like corn sugar, because like corn syrup is
No, pour it directly in the gas tank. Is just putting famously fine to do is putting sugar in a gas tank.
It doesn't fuck up the gas tank as much as you would think.
I thought that's what they were doing during going back to 2008, because they had those, bring in your clunkers and thinking of the plane, the clunk, bring in your clunkers.
Yes.
They would just pour sugar into the gas tank and then run the car as hard as they can with no oil at the same time.
I think the no oil would be more of a thing that would help.
And that's fair.
But the sugar and gas tank thing, I believe, is mostly a myth. That like if you have enough gas to run the vehicle, the sugar is not actually going to do much.
Like any sediment, sugar can clog the fuel injectors or fuel filter if there's too much of it. So you're not going to fuck up the engine. You're just going to fuck up the injectors of the filters, which makes sense because you're putting something that shouldn't be in there.
But like you could also put in sand.
Sand would fuck up your car if it got into the like the pistons or whatever.
Yes, and also unlike sugar, sand will bond with the gas.
Really?
It will produce sludge.
I didn't know that.
Kitty litter is the best thing to do because then it'll actively soak up the gas.
Yeah, well, kitty litter is famously good at absorbing everything, and I'm very familiar with that, thanks to the little doofus that's sitting next to me as we talk. Hey, that's one of our staff members.
Yeah, my coworker here is currently, I think, hiding under my bed.
Oh,
because I slammed the table during the last recording session. Anyway, yeah, so that's maple syrup. What did we learn?
That maple syrup is a precious commodity and is arguably worth more than gold.
Yes, it is. It is the gold of Canada.
Well, we do have gold in this country, like real gold, more than
no, we
probably
don't. We have the gold of Canada. If it's the correct grade of maple syrup, sometimes it's the amber of Canada.
Okay, so one thing I'm going to say about as a side note, and before we finish off, is that from what I understand about grading, you'll see like grade A or grade AAA or whatever. All it is about the color. It doesn't actually mean anything about the flavor, because I believe in blind taste tests, there's no difference, but like it's just the color.
Yeah, the flavoring is mostly impacted by the point in the season that it's harvested. Mostly because as it gets so like the mechanism of how this works is that when it's cold, the sugars concentrate in the roots because they can't move, because it's through either osmosis or capillary action. Again, that's a fight for plant biologists. Like it still needs the water in the sap, the water component of the sap, to be liquid. So if the tree is too cold for it to move effectively, the sugars just kind of congeal in the roots. And when it warms up, then they're suddenly liberated, but it's a lot more densely saturated with sugars, which is what's ideal for it. As the weather gets warmer, the amount of sugar that's concentrated in the roots versus other things like metals leached from the soil and things like that becomes much lower. So you end up with a less sweet product, which actually I prefer.
One thing, as a side note, is if you're visiting Canada and you're looking to buy maple syrup, my personal advice is to actually go to a grocery store and just buy whatever maple syrup you see on the shelf there. A lot more often than not, and you'll see this in even in drugstore chains, but especially like those little souvenir shops that just sell everything for 4 times the price. The maple syrup that's being sold in there is like not really worthwhile in terms of like cost per milliliter. I would recommend that you just pop into a Safeway or a Save On Foods or whatever. If you're in Western Canada, if you're in Eastern Canada, I don't know, go to Sobeys or Metro, and just grab yourself a bottle there and just take that home. You're going to get far more bang for the buck. If you're really lucky, you might be able to find the really cool can of maple syrup, which actually has some nice art on it. And you get something like, I don't know, 400 milliliters in those cans.
Yeah, if you are looking for maple syrup in a glass bottle, I actually genuinely recommend Uncle Luke's, mostly because they label on their bottles the season that they're in, and it's all color coded and everything, so you know what you're getting.
It's like fucking
And
wine.
yeah, and honestly, it's still cheaper per milliliter than the stuff you'll get in a gift shop. Don't buy the gift shop stuff. The one that keeps getting bottled up in the like maple leaf shaped glass container is dog shit. Like,
it's just a waste of money. Like it's still maple syrup. It'll still taste fine, in my opinion. You're just getting so few for it. Like if you really want to get something fun, you can get those maple syrup. Like I think they're sold as like little tiny bites or whatever they are, and you can chew on those, and
yeah.
those are okay. And if you only find them in a gift shop, it's fine. But just don't buy the syrup bottles. Just don't.
Yeah, no, don't. Go to a grocery store. It's way cheaper.
Yeah, maybe avoid Loblaws, but whatever.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Avoid Loblaws. Check for any strikes. Don't cross a picket line. But other than that, go to a grocery store.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, that's an episode.
It is an episode. Well, if you have any comments or questions, we have an email. It is mailbag@shawiniganmoments.ca, or you can check out our website at shawiniganmoments.ca, where you can find links to all options for listening to the podcast and also see photos of the two respective staff members that we were just talking about a few minutes ago.
Yes.
I guess we can say that the next episode will be on when the goo was turned into a flag.
Yes.
I think that's a podcast.
That is a podcast. Shawinigan Moments is written and recorded on the unceded territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, Stolo, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations in what is otherwise called Vancouver.